We're all self-made, but only successful people admit it. This is a quote by Pena, self-made billionaire, someone who grew up on the streets of LA with literally nothing and now lives in Guthrie Castle, Scotland. Welcome to McBain Moments. So this quote really struck me, as many of the quotes that I present on McBain Moments do. But this one hit me like a slap in the face, because no matter what situation we're in, realistically, we're the ones responsible for putting ourselves there. And this is something that a lot of us, including myself, don't really think about when we're thinking about how to improve our conditions. Ultimately speaking, we are responsible for where we are today. We're responsible for where we were last year. We'll be responsible for where we are next year. But we as the individual need to figure out, okay, this is where I am. This is how I got here. This is how I get to the next step. And when we fail, we need to look in the mirror and say, okay, this is my fault. Or even if somehow it's not your fault, you have to say, this is my responsibility to correct. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's really not. In fact, it's really easy to try and deflect that responsibility onto the causal factors of what happened, or to ancillary factors of what happened, and say, well, the timing wasn't right, or this wasn't the right opportunity, or they didn't like me, or my hair was messy, maybe my suit was dirty. Then none of that mattered. Well, those may have been factors, but a lot of those factors you can control. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what individual factor the other person saw. Ultimately speaking, it was your job to either overcome the factor or not allow the factor to be a factor in the first place. And those are not easy pills to swallow. That's not an easy thing to come to terms with. And so it's one of those things where, as I was thinking about it, as I was rolling this quote around in my head, I was thinking, looking back on my life, all of the things that have happened, and I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life, a lot of them, and figuring out, okay, what went wrong? And I could blame the other people in my life, who I was dating at the time, the friends I was keeping, the job I had, the boss I had. I could blame all of those things, but ultimately it was my choice to be there. I was the one who put myself there. I was the one who took that job. I was the one associated with those friends. I was the one who was dating that person. And this isn't to rag on all of the people that I've had in my past. All of them taught me something important. All of them had an important part to play in my life. But that doesn't mean that all of them were beneficial. And some were beneficial and it just didn't work out. I have friends that I still have on Facebook, but I don't really associate with them in person, either because we moved too far away from each other, or because the relationship as a close relationship stopped being beneficial to us. So we keep track of each other. We're still friendly with each other, but we don't see each other every day like we did back, 10 years ago. That is a normal evolution in life. But what ends up being is, when you look back on things, say, what did I do to create this situation? Or what did I do to allow this situation to happen? How do I prevent it from happening again? How do I make it so that the next time something happens, I can make it better? Or I can avoid a bad situation altogether? Because that's what it comes down to. You're self-made. Where you are now is totally on you. You made choices that put you where you are today, good or bad. If you're a billionaire, you totally did that. If you're dirt poor, you did that too. Very few aspects of your life are not because of something you did. Now, that doesn't mean that things happen that you had no control over. If you were at work and you work in a kitchen and an oven exploded, that's not your fault. If you slid into a fryolator, happened to my father, he was up on a ladder, slipped off into a fryolator. It's not his fault. It's especially not his fault that someone else turned it back on after he turned it off. Doesn't mean he didn't have to take responsibility for it and figure out how to move on in his life. And it took him a couple of years, because when you fall in a fryolator, you can potentially lose your feet. Thankfully, he didn't. He still took responsibility for it. He still moved on. He still made something of himself. And yeah, it was hard. And yeah, it set him back. But he grabbed it with both hands and he said, okay, we're going to make the best of this and figure out the next step. And so, and it's just one of those things that you have to look at what's happening and decide, how am I going to deal with this? Am I going to wallow in it and allow it to overcome me? Or am I going to take responsibility for it? Say, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's on me to fix this. It's on me to make things better. And go forward and make the most of everything. Change the things that you can, deal with the things you can't, and make the best life for yourself. Because you're self-made. Win or lose, you're self-made. You might leverage relationships. You might build a network. You might build relationships with people. But ultimately, it's on you. So go make the best you can be. And I'll see you all on the other side. This has been a McBain moment.